In the darkness, the engines roar so loudly it seems the sky is about to explode. Suddenly, a hail of anti-aircraft fire lights up the night like 1,000 lightning bolts. You're about to jump into the unknown, into a territory filled with enemies. This isn't fiction. It's the early morning of June 6, 1944, and for Joe Lesniewski, a 21-year-old paratrooper from Easy Company, hell is about to begin. Can he survive the longest day? The interior of the C-47 was a chaotic mess of men and equipment. Joe, like so many others, was in his 20s. The tension was palpable, a mix of fear and adrenaline. They had trained for this for months, but nothing prepares you for the moment the red light turns green. "Go, go, go!" the sergeant shouted. Joe dove into the void. The descent was a nightmare. Enemy tracers streaked across the sky, looking for easy prey. The air was filled with the roar of explosions and screams. Joe felt the brutal tug of his parachute as it opened, a momentary relief before the uncertainty of landing. He fell hard into a flooded field, the cold water chilling his bones. He was alone. He lost his leg bag containing ammunition and supplies during the jump, a common problem that night. He was completely disoriented. Only the distant crackle of machine gun fire and the glow of gunfire gave him a vague idea of where the enemy was. His first objective: find other paratroopers, form a unit, and survive. Using his little toy cricket as a call sign, 1 click to ask, 2 to answer, Joe began to move cautiously. Every shadow seemed a German soldier, every crack of a branch, an ambush. The darkness was both a shield and a threat. Finally, he heard the expected reply. He joined a handful of men. The 101st Airborne's mission was to secure the exits from the Utah beaches, preventing the Germans from sending reinforcements. This meant capturing vital bridges and crossroads. Joe and his comrades quickly found themselves in combat, facing German patrols, machine gun nests, and the harsh realities of war. One of the first key objectives was the village of Saint-Mire-Église, where other paratroopers had landed directly on the square, some clinging to trees and buildings. Joe wasn't there, but stories of the ferocity of the fighting quickly spread. His group moved south toward Corentin. The fight for Corentin would be one of the toughest. The city was a vital communications hub linking the Utah and Omaha beachheads. The Germans, especially the feared Fallschirmjäger, or German paratroopers, would defend it tooth and nail. Joe and Easy Company found themselves immersed in brutal urban combat. They advanced street by street, house by house. Danger lurked around every window, around every corner. A comrade would fall, and you had to keep going. Fatigue, hunger, and fear were constant. Joe would remember the sound of bullets whizzing by, the thunder of mortars, the sight of wounded or dead comrades. During the assault on Corentin, Easy Company made a bayonet charge to dislodge the Germans from a key position. It was an act of sheer desperation and courage. Joe was in the middle of it, running into enemy fire, shouting with his comrades, adrenaline overriding fear for a few precious moments. They managed to take Corentin, but the cost was high. The unit was decimated. Joe had seen more death and destruction in a few days than many see in a lifetime. But there was no time to rest. Normandy was just the beginning of their long journey across Europe. After Normandy, Easy Company was withdrawn to England to re-equip and receive replacements. The relief was immense, but the shadow of their lost friends weighed heavily on them. Joe, like the others, was trying to process what had happened. The camaraderie forged in combat was the only thing that kept them sane. Then came Operation Market Garden, the Netherlands. Another parachute jump, this time in broad daylight. The idea was to capture a series of bridges to allow a rapid advance of Allied armor into Germany. Joe and the Easy dropped near Sun, with the mission of capturing the bridge over the Wilhelmina Canal. The jump was relatively uneventful compared to Normandy, but the resistance on the ground was fierce. The Germans blew up the Sun Bridge just as they arrived. This delayed the entire advance. Easy was involved in heavy fighting to secure the area and then protect the famous Hell's Corridor, the narrow road along which the armored vehicles advanced. Joe participated in the defense of Noonan, the village where Van Gogh had lived. There they faced German tanks and artillery. The fighting was intense, and casualties continued to mount. Market Garden, despite the heroism of men like Joe, would not achieve its ultimate objectives. It was a costly setback. The unit fought in the area known as the Island, a difficult, swampy terrain between two rivers. Conditions were miserable: constant rain, mud, cold, and the enemy always close. Patrols were dangerous, and artillery fire was a constant threat. Joe pressed on, one day at a time. After Holland, winter 1944 arrived, and with it, the surprise German offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge. The 101st Airborne was rushed to Bastogne, a crucial road junction in Belgium. They had no adequate winter clothing, nor enough ammunition or food. Joe and his companions arrived in Bastogne just before the Germans completely surrounded it. They found themselves trapped, outnumbered, enduring one of the worst artillery bombardments of the war. The forests around Bastogne became an icy slaughterhouse. The temperatures were freezing. The men dug foxholes in the snow and frozen ground. Food was scarce. Ammunition was rationed. But they refused to surrender. When the Germans demanded capitulation, General McAuliffe's response was legendary: nuts. Joe was on the front lines, enduring the bitter cold and constant enemy attacks. Watching his friends suffer frostbite, injury, or death was a terrible ordeal. Morale was low, but the determination to resist was unwavering. Each man depended on the other for survival. He would remember the endless nights in his foxhole, shivering from the cold, listening to shells whizzing overhead and the distant advance of German tanks. The dense fog often hid the enemy until they were almost upon them. It was a fight for survival, pure and simple. On Christmas Day 1944, despite being surrounded and under fire, the men tried to keep their spirits up. There were small gestures of humanity, sharing the meager rations, remembering their homes. For Joe, as for many, it was a bittersweet day, marked by absence and danger. Finally, the tanks of Patton's Third Army broke through the encirclement, bringing relief and supplies. Bastogne had held. Joe Lesniewski had survived another hell. But the war wasn't over yet. Easy Company would fight on. From Bastogne, the unit advanced into Germany. They participated in the capture of towns and cities, facing resistance that was sometimes fanatical, sometimes demoralized. Joe was at the forefront of these advances, always facing danger. Every day was a new test. One of the most shocking moments for Joe and his companions was the discovery of a concentration camp near Landsberg. What they saw there horrified them and strengthened their determination to end the Nazi regime. The atrocities were unimaginable. Joe and Easy Company reached Berchtesgaden, Hitler's Alpine retreat, the Eagle's Nest. It was a symbol of the Nazi power now in their hands. The war in Europe was coming to an end. For Joe, it meant the nightmare might be over. When Germany's surrender was finally announced, the feeling was one of indescribable relief mixed with exhaustion. They had made it to the end. Joe Lesniewski had jumped in Normandy, fought in Holland, held out at Bastogne, and advanced into the heart of Germany. He had survived. But the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain. He had lost many friends, seen things no one should ever see. The war had changed him forever. Returning home, to a normal life, would be a different kind of challenge. Joe Lesniewski, like so many others of the greatest generation, returned home and tried to build a life. He worked and started a family. He didn't talk much about his experiences, as was common among veterans. But what he and his comrades in Easy Company achieved, their courage and resilience, would become legendary. His story is a testament to the human capacity to endure the unbearable, to find strength in camaraderie, and to fight for freedom against all odds. Joe didn't consider himself a hero, just a soldier doing his job. But to us, he and all those who fought are true heroes. The hell of Normandy was just the first chapter of his odyssey. Every battle, every jump, every day of survival was a test. Joe Lesniewski overcame it. His legacy, and that of Easy Company, lives on in the stories we tell, reminding us of the price of freedom and the extraordinary courage of ordinary people in extraordinary times. Joe Lesniewski passed away in 2012 at the age of 91. He lived a long and full life after the war, but he would always be remembered as one of the brave paratroopers of Easy Company, a man who jumped into hell and survived to tell the tale, albeit quietly. His story, and that of his comrades, reminds us that freedom comes at a price, and it was paid by young men like him, facing unimaginable dangers with a courage that still inspires us today. A true survivor of the crucible of World War II. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, and subscribe. See you in the next video.